What's going on, friends? Logan Myerz here for Cinephellas.com doing more 31 Days of Horror, and I'm going back to 1987 to talk about a sequel that I watched, a VHS tape growing up as a kid. I'm talking about Creepshow 2. This time around it's written by George A. Romero and directed by Michael Gornick. The first film was obviously written by Stephen King and directed by George A. Romero, so this time around they did some changes. So this is yet another anthology story, another anthology movie. There's 3 stories compared to the first film. With the setup of the film, we have a new creep this time around. It's played by Tom Savini. It kind of looks like a deranged, like, leprechaun as the creep. Compared to the first movie, it's like the skeleton, but this time it just looks like a leprechaun kind of thing, and it's comedic to watch. And you know, the comic book introduces the comic book and opening that up, and there's a lot of animation in this film between all the stories. It has this like cartoon leading up into that story. I wasn't 100% sold on the way they went about the creep this time around. I like the original with the skeleton, but you know, I'm not gonna hate on it for that. The first story is called Old Chief Woodenhead, and this is my favorite story in this film, and something I still think about all these years later after watching it for the first time as a kid. It scared the shit out of me. Every time I go to like a casino or go to like a lodge or go to a hotel, they have like the wooden statues there, and it always reminds me of the story. So the setup of the first story, Old Chief Woodenhead, we had George Kennedy plays this convenience store owner in the middle of the desert. It kind of looks like New Mexico or like Nevada, basically like a ghost town. There's like nobody there, and they're running the store. They're, you know, obviously not making ends meet because nobody goes in there to buy stuff. So they're really struggling. There's some young teenagers that show up, you know, trying to rob the place, and then they end up dying, and things don't turn out well for them. But I learned about this film, this is a young Holt McKillany. He's in Mindhunter, obviously a lot older now, but he was real young in 1987. He plays this Native American, I guess, teenager. He has like long black hair. He's very into himself. He's a narcissistic psychopath, pretty much. And he's talking about how he's going to make it big, move to LA, become this famous Hollywood actor. And he keeps talking about himself. He's really into himself. And his 2 buddies like, you know what? I don't fucking care. They're trying to make some money. And it doesn't end well for George Kennedy's character and his wife. Essentially, the story is like a revenge tale. We have the wooden Native American statue that comes to life and goes after these teenagers that killed George Kennedy's character and his wife. It comes to life, and I love all the practical effects, you know, like a guy in a suit and how they did all the effects. It looks like a wooden statue coming to life, like the eyes moving around and stuff. And it doesn't. There's a lot of great practical effects and kill scenes in the very first story, which I absolutely loved, and definitely the best story of the 3 in this film. So the second story in the movie is called The Raft. Essentially, we have a group of teenagers, but they're smoking weed. They're going out to the lake. It's like summertime. They just want to go swimming. They're out in the water, and they see this weird kind of gooey substance kind of coming towards them in the water. And it kind of comes to life as this creature, and obviously the teenagers are all stoned and stupid. They're like, let's like touch it, let's look at it. Just a lot of dumb decisions on their part, and obviously setting up more great kill scenes. You know, Creepshow always has the best practical effects and best kill scenes, and there's a lot of those in the second story. The Raft is not as compelling as the first story. So the third story is called The Hitchhiker. This lady is a really terrible human being. So she's driving late at night. She hits this hitchhiker that's driving on this road and takes off because she's, again, a terrible human being. And the guy comes back and finds the woman, and a lot of great sequences in this story as well. I loved all the effects, and it was pretty eerie because we've all been in that situation, not hitting somebody, but driving late at night and you see somebody off into the distance. But always make the right decision. If you hit somebody, don't take off because it won't end well, according to Creepshow. The third story of The Hitchhiker, it's all like a revenge tale kind of thing of her cheating on her husband, hitting this guy, and him coming back to get her. And I think the themes and the overall messages in this movie is revenge. You know, if people do terrible things, karma's a bitch, will come back and get you and kill you eventually. And that's what I took out of this film. But I think my favorite story is the first one. Something I remember you know, seeing as a kid, watching this film for the first time in the late 80s. I remember going to the local video store in town and seeing the Creepshow 2 cover on the VHS tape of the Creep, like in the movie theater, and probably one of my favorite movie posters, especially back then. I thought it really stood out, and I just remember seeing that as a kid and being spooked out by that. And all these years later, revisiting Creepshow 2, it definitely doesn't hold up as much as I remember it. Creepshow 1, the original with Stephen King and George A. Romero, is 100 times better. I thought the storytelling in the first film was also a lot better. The acting was better. But this time, in part 2, the acting was not as good. George Kennedy was probably one of the better performances because he was a great actor. And then seeing a young Holt McKillany playing this crazy psychopath with long hair, I thought that was pretty funny, seeing him super young. But The Raft and The Hitchhiker were not as good. I think The Raft was the weakest story in the entire movie. But I will give it up to the animation of the comic book, how they incorporated that into the film, of introducing the Creep of the comics and then showing these sort of like cartoons in between the stories. I thought that worked to its advantage. And again, the Creep was okay in this film. He was just more funny looking than he was really terrifying. But I'll give it up to Tom Savini for pulling that costume off and pulling off the effects and makeup. So overall, I'm giving Michael Gornick's Creepshow 2 a 2.5 out of 5 Creepshow hair pieces. So what did you guys think of Creepshow 2 that came out in 1987? What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? What's your favorite story in the film? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit subscribe. This is Logan Myerz signing out with the Creep up here. Better not steal his Lucky Charms. Until the next video review on 31 Days of Horror. Cheers!